Hello and good evening, and a very warm welcome to this How To Academy event. My name's Matt Stadlen. I was a presenter at the LBC radio station and at the BBC as well, and a columnist at the Telegraph. These days you can find me on Radio 5 Live, you can find me on Channel 5, you can find me on Twitter, and hosting lots of events. I've just hosted my 300th live event, and it's a particular privilege for me to introduce to you this evening someone you may already know of through his writing, someone who's spent a quarter century with the FBI, someone who's really been there and done that, Joe Navarro. He's written another book, yet another book, this one called Be Exceptional. It's about mastering the 5 traits that can set you apart from other people. I won't introduce you for any longer than that because there's so much to go through, Joe. Very warm welcome to you as well.
Matthew, it's a real pleasure to be with you. I was elated when I was offered this opportunity to be with you. So thank you.
You certainly know how to communicate, and of course, communication is the third of the 5 traits that we need to try to master. We'll come to that later. First, just set out why you wrote this book.
You know, for over the years, I've been cataloging human behavior, both on my own through studies at university. I created my own apprenticeship program, which helped me within the FBI. And, you know, and I had just thousands of entries about human behavior. And most of my writing had focused on a lot of negative things, the nasty people that are out there. In the book, Dangerous Personalities, it was all about the people that can hurt you. But then as I was going through my notes, you know, the counterpart to that was all the traits of these really exceptional individuals. And I say exceptional because not because necessarily they were great artists or musicians or speakers, but they were exceptional in the influence, the positive influence they had on others. And so I started to study them at length. And this process, by the way, began in 2008. And it wasn't until last year that I finally had it all written up. So it had taken me a while, and it was distilled down to the 5 traits that exceptional people truly sets them apart. And I just thought, you know what, share it and let the marketplace decide whether they like it or not.
You say very early on that being exceptional isn't about your training, it's not even about your skill set that we might assume it is. It's about something else. Can you reassure us, given that so few people are, by definition, exceptional, that by reading your book, by listening to you now, that we really do have a decent chance of becoming exceptional ourselves?
Yeah, I can give you that assurance because I have looked at everything from farmers to, you know, I talk about this little woman in the middle of Brazil who is blind and has this exquisite expertise in working with needlework. But it's how she's blind, but it's how she handles her family that stands out. And as I looked at with a very broad brush, what do they have in common? Come to find out that it has to do with diligence, dedication, application of self, willingness to sacrifice, focus. These are things that we can all do if we but apply ourselves. You know, I looked at the life of, for instance, Benjamin Franklin, who arrives from Boston with 15 cents in his pocket and has the mental wherewithal to say, you know what, I need to reinvent myself. Otherwise, I'm just going to be here setting type the rest of my life. And he begins to study the successful people around him, how they dress, how they talk, what they need to do. He, in some ways, very much like Winston Churchill, who ends up in India And he's bored stiff. So he tells his mother, send me all the books. Send me all the books I should have read at university. And he creates this masterful scaffolding, which then unveils itself when Britain was in its darkest hour. And that's one of the things that I find, that these individuals self-prepare in advance without any expectation of, well, when will this be needed? They just do it because it's the right thing. And so, yes, I think anybody that applies themselves and also applies themselves to be a better version of themselves, and whether that means being more patient, being more understanding, yeah, definitely, I would say it can be done.
Curiosity is important.
Ah.
I was speaking to the English philosopher earlier today, Professor A.C. Grayling, and he said that the most curious people are children, and being a philosopher is almost like being in a perpetual childlike state. You talk about Benjamin Franklin's own curiosity, you talk about how he came up with the lightning rod, and this sort of discovery. I mean, you mentioned just now about rediscovering himself almost, but this sort of discovery meant that when he became the first American ambassador to France, he came over here, he was kind of an icon, he was a legend. And even en route to France, he was dipping his finger in or his thermostat in the sea and basically working out before anyone else the Gulf Stream, because it got warmer as he went south.
Yeah, the curiosity, like the professor said, and I completely agree, it's with us as youngsters. And then somehow people come along, and some of those people are our own parents, and say, stop asking me that. Don't pester me. I was at the airport not too long ago, and this little kid was saying, he's staring at an airplane, one of the last 747s. It's magnificent. And he's asking his mom, how does that fly? And I loved it, because she took a moment to say, well, the engines push it through the air. And she actually, and I loved it, because most people don't know. She said the air goes over the wing and it creates lift. And I thought, she has blessed this child. He's curious, and she rewards him. And it's that yearning for knowledge. We look at children around 12 to 14, and all of a sudden they switch that off, and they're more interested in relationships. But what exceptional people have is this continued appreciation for novelty, for innovation, a curiosity for how does that form. Benjamin Franklin, he could have just sat in the boat and minded his own business, but he dropped that thermometer, and he discovers why it was that all of a sudden, there's ice on the rivers in Boston, but there's no ice as he's sailing, across the Atlantic. And there's so many examples of that, of people that just, the Wright brothers, who couldn't figure out. Remember, the Wright brothers were two bicycle mechanics, for heaven's sake. But they became curious as to how air travels over the wing of a bird. And we owe so much today to them. And I think this is something that we can easily encourage in others, and easily encourage in ourselves. And I ask people all the time, what have you done to feed that curiosity? Because your brain, the visual cortex, is about the size of your fist, and it wants to be fed. And I'm not just talking Netflix. I mean, going out and doing some discovery. And I think that can help us both emotionally. It can certainly help us physically, challenging us to go outside, and in many other ways.
Malcolm Gladwell, you'll know, one of his books was Outliers, and he talked about 10,000 hours of preparation. And one of those examples was Bill Gates. And how he worked in the back shed on very, very early computers. And I kind of get the sense that, as you're saying, curiosity can be a very, very effective form of preparation. You look, for example, at the life story of Elon Musk. When he was a boy, I don't think he was terribly popular, but he was curious and he was teaching himself. These are ways that we can all make a difference to our own lives and thereby to others, because I think it's important to point out here that there's quite a bit of altruism going on in the idea of being exceptional. This isn't just a selfish pursuit. By the end of the book, you're telling us that these two crucial traits, or traits within traits perhaps, are basically allaying fear, and perhaps not just for others, but for ourselves as well. And also trying to create psychological comfort for ourselves and for others.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a very good point, Matthew. When it comes to leadership, right? If you go to any leadership school, whether it's military or in the business sector, they're talking about, okay, managers, they do things well or do them right, but leaders, give us the insight of what to do right. They never talk about one of the things that's most important, which applies both in business and in the military, and that is the attenuation of fear. And what exceptional people do is they make it a point to go out and deal with the apprehension, deal with the concerns, deal with the natural fear that can come to a child or a teenager or an adult, and say, this is a challenge. Whether you look at Alexander the Great walking amongst his troops before each battle, and just hanging out with the with the men, just to, hey, it's going to be all right. We're outnumbered, but we're going to be all right. Eisenhower with the paratroopers, 6 hours before they were going to drop behind enemy lines, he's out there having a cigarette with them and say, hey, guys, we're going to be okay. This is one of those things that exceptional people just seem to not only do, but relish to do it. And it's so undervalued by so many, and yet it is one of those things that stands out about the exceptional, who create the psychological comfort by attenuating fear.
And Joe, you yourself have led an exceptional life. You've had an extraordinary life. I'd like you to use one of the examples that you talk about in the book relating to yourself, when you were invited to, which really meant told to go on that course, which basically involved having a submachine gun, all sorts of different apparatus, helmets, night vision, all of that, so you could go up and down buildings in very dangerous circumstances. Tell us about that, because I think in the process of that, you realized that didn't maybe come as naturally to you as you hoped. How did you attenuate the fear?
Yeah, as you're saying all that, I am reliving the weight. If you see me sinking, it's because I can feel the weight of the Kevlar. You look on television and you see these the SAS or these SWAT operators or these commandos, and it looks really cool. What they don't tell you is all the equipment chafes. It's heavy. Half the time the radio doesn't work. And, so I get volunteered to be a rappel master, which means I have to learn how to climb mountains, descend from mountains, and work with ropes and all that. But I'm also the team medic. So, I'm up in Virginia, and the name of the mountain I forget right now, but it's raining, which they don't tell you when they volunteer you for this. It's cold, and they say, well, you got to climb up, and you've got to do it with all the gear that you carry, which is the helmet, the bulletproof vest, the titanium protector that goes in front. I've got IV bottles. I've got a full medical kit to take care of a gunshot wound. I've got my MP5. I've got magazines. I've got 4 stun grenades. I'm weighing practically twice what I normally weigh. And it's raining and it's lightning. And I'm thinking, okay, how much am I getting paid for this? And one of my trainers, you know, he sees it. He's reading my body language. And he comes over to me and he says, "What's the worst that can happen, Joe?" Well, how about death? Let's consider that one. I said. He says, "Nobody's going to let you die, Joe. That's why I'm here, repelling you on rappel, on belay." He says, "What's the worst? You fall? We'll catch you. You only fall about 3 or 4 feet, and we've got belay lines." And he says, "What do you fear?" And I thought, this is the first time anybody in the FBI has mentioned fear, because I've done a lot of things like making arrests by myself with help 3 hours away. And he, you know, he just puts his hand on my back and he says, "It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right." And he says, "Just take one step at a time." I says, "I'm not going to let anything happen to you." And it's like he washed that away from me. Now, I won't tell you, climbing that mountain, which took something like 5.5 hours, wasn't difficult. I mean, it was raining. We were slipping halfway up. We had to pretend that somebody was injured, and we had to do all sorts of things. But it was probably one of the first times in my life where I saw that part of leadership wasn't yelling at somebody, "Hey, get going." It wasn't about making fun of somebody. "Oh, look at him. He's scared to go up." It was about the attenuation of fear. And this was an extraordinary man exercising an extraordinary technique, which often isn't taught. And it was not life-changing per se, but it was an awakening of the importance of something that we see in our lives, maybe a grandparent that did that for us, or a coach, or a good leader. And it's something that should be taught because it's what really sets the exceptional apart.
Let's look at another example of exceptional leadership. And this is an example I think we can safely fit under the heading self-mastery. Self-mastery is the first of these 5 categories, these 5 traits that you take us through. Yep. This involves kind of a senior FBI guy. It is a guy. And this guy tells their boss that he's got to stand himself down. Mm. And this is in the middle of a hot day, and it's in the middle of a really tense operation. There's a hostage situation. Someone has taken his girlfriend without her consent. She needs medicine. An ambulance needs to be close by without it being found out or discovered by the hostage taker. And there you have this guy. He's a senior FBI guy. He's done it all before. He wants to be at the heart of things. And what happens?
He wants to lead his team. He wants to be there. He knows there's a victim. You know, the only thing we think about is the victim. We've got to rescue her. We've got to provide for her. We've got to make sure that this guy does not harm her. All this is going down. But as this is going down, very experienced operator, he notices that he's not asking the right questions. He's missing things. Where are the how does the door open? Does it door open to the inside or the outside? Where are the bolts? How many windows are there? Where's the nearest hospital? All kinds of questions. How thick are the walls between the apartments? All the questions that need to be asked weren't being asked. And so he goes to the special agent in charge and he says, I gotta, we're at Event Horizon here. We're ready to go, but I've got to drop this guy out. And the special agent in charge, the SAC, says, do what you got to do. And that guy was me. And I said, I got to take myself out. And he just looked at me. I mean, you could see I don't think I mentioned it in the book, but I talked to him since, and he says, "You don't understand. The blood went out from me." He says, "I'm counting on you." And I said, "Yeah, but I can't count on myself. My mind is not in this. It's somewhere else."
You'd lost
And
your grandmother the previous week.
I had lost my grandmother the previous week, and it hadn't entered into my mind that somehow that was affecting me. And you know, we're ready to go. We're ready to hand it off to the command post that will now take us in the conga line right up to the door. And I said, I've got to take myself out. My mind is not here. I didn't have an explanation. And he agreed. So I took myself out, and I'm glad I did. We got the hostage out. Everything went fine. But to this day, I've often said, what if something had gone wrong? And that would have been unforgivable. And what it taught me is that somebody else may not catch it, but we have to be honest and with ourselves and say, you know what, you're not up to this task right now. And for me, I think this is something that needs to be recognized, that we're not always going to be at 100%, or that maybe this often happens, that maybe I'm not the best person to do this interview.
So talk us through a little more generally self-mastery in the context of becoming exceptional.
Yeah.